The last thing I saw before I blacked out was its face in my rearview mirror, not on the road behind me, but inside the car, leaning over the seat. Its breath smelled of wet earth and old blood. Nightbound Bloodline presents 5 true scary stories about monsters. Every culture has its monsters. They linger in the shadows of our oldest stories, whispered warnings around campfires. But sometimes, the shadows step into the light. What you are about to hear are 5 accounts from ordinary people who insist, with every fiber of their being, that they faced something beyond our understanding. These are not campfire tales. They are testimonies. Listen closely. Our first story comes from a man who thought he knew the wilderness like the back of his hand, until the night the wilderness knew him back. He calls his account, The Timber Taker. Story 1, The Timber Taker. My name's David. I'm 54 years old. I've been a licensed surveyor for the state of Oregon for nearly 3 decades. My job is facts, measurements, tangible, mappable reality. I don't believe in ghost stories. I think Bigfoot is a fun myth for tourists, and I've always said the only monsters in these woods are the 2-legged kind. Or at least, I used to say that. I was up near the Willamette National Forest, doing a preliminary survey for a potential forestry access road. Deep, old-growth territory. It was late October, and the air had that sharp, pine-scented cold that makes everything feel crisp and clear. I was alone, which wasn't unusual. I preferred it. Just the sound of my own boots on the duff, the chatter of squirrels, my own breathing. The first thing that was off was the silence. It hit in the late afternoon. 1 minute the forest was its usual, busy self. The next, it was like someone had thrown a soundproof blanket over everything. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. You don't realize how loud the woods are until that sound gets snatched away. It leaves a ringing in your ears. A pressure. I shook it off. Told myself a predator was nearby, a cougar maybe. They can do that. I kept working, but I'll admit, I checked over my shoulder a little more often. Then came the smell. It drifted on the cold air, a thick, musky odor, like a wet dog that had been rolling in something rotten. It was pungent, physical. It coated the back of my throat. That's when the first real thread of fear, cold and thin, started winding through my gut. I decided to pack it in early. The light was starting to go gold anyway. As I was heading back to my truck, about a mile through thick timber, I heard the footsteps. They weren't hiding. They were heavy, crunch, crunch, crunch through the fallen branches, keeping pace with me about 50 yards to my left, just out of sight behind a wall of firs. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I took 3 quick steps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. 3 answers. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. I called out, "Hello?" "Nothing," I said, louder. "Cougar or bear? You don't want me. I don't want you." A stupid thing to say, but you grasp for normalcy. That's when I saw it. Just a glimpse, as it crossed a narrow break in the trees about 70 yards ahead. It wasn't a bear. A bear moves on all 4s with a rolling gait. This thing was upright, walking on 2 legs with a frightening, unnatural ease. It was tall, 7, maybe 8 feet. Its torso was immense, shoulders hunched and powerful. It was covered in a shaggy, matted fur that was a dirty, grayish-brown, like old bark. But it was the proportions that were all wrong. The arms were too long, ending in what looked like dark, heavy hands. The legs seemed backwards at the knee. And its head, it wasn't a wolf's head. It was elongated, almost horse-like, but with a pronounced, blunt snout. I froze. My brain short-circuited, trying to file it under bear or weird moose, but it wouldn't fit. It stopped in the break and turned. It looked right at me. The eyes, they weren't reflective like an animal's. They were a flat, dark, intelligent brown. They held no fear, no animal curiosity, just a cold, appraising focus. It knew I was there. It had always known. A low sound came from it. Not a growl, not a roar. It was a deep, guttural vocalization, a rumble that seemed to vibrate in my own chest. It was a sound of territory, of ownership. I ran. I'm not ashamed to say it. I dropped my expensive theodolite and I ran like hell, branches whipping my face, my breath tearing in ragged sobs. I could hear it behind me, not running, but moving, a steady, relentless thump crunch through the undergrowth. It wasn't sprinting to catch me. It was pacing me, hurting me, and I realized, with a terror that turned my blood to ice, it was between me and the direct route to my truck. It was smarter than me in its own woods. I had to cut east, then south, adding nearly 2 miles to my route. Every time I slowed, I'd hear that heavy footfall, or a tree would creak as if something massive was leaning against it. The smell was everywhere. It was playing with me, a cat with a mouse. When I finally burst out of the tree lean and saw my truck, I've never felt such a desperate, weeping relief. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. I threw myself inside, locked the doors, and peeled out, gravel spraying. I didn't look back for 10 miles. But David's story doesn't end at the tree lean. He arrived home, a 2-hour drive done in a blind panic. He pulled into his driveway, the familiar sight of his porch light a sanctuary. He killed the engine, slumped over the wheel, and finally allowed himself to breathe. That's when he caught the scent in the closed, warm air of his truck cab. That same wet dog, rotten earth musk. He slowly turned to look in the back seat. It was empty. Thank God, it was empty. But on the floor of the back seat, clear as day on the clean rubber mat, were 3 perfect, muddy footprints. They were long, too narrow to be a bear's, and they had the distinct, elongated shape of a foot that had never worn a shoe. They led from one rear door to the other, as if something had ridden with me, had gotten in at the woods and gotten out here, at my home, to let me know it could. I sold that truck the next week. I put in for a transfer to a desk job in the city. I haven't set foot in deep timber since. People ask me what I saw. I tell them it was a bear. It's easier. But you asked for the truth. I know what I saw. It was real, and it knew where I lived. Some monsters don't just stay in the woods. They follow you home to make sure you remember. Story 2. The Thing in the Foundation. Our next account comes from a different kind of wilderness, the urban kind. A place where history layers itself under concrete and brick, and sometimes something old refuses to stay buried. This is Marisol's story. I'm Marisol. I'm 29, an architectural historian. My job is to research old buildings, to uncover their stories. I guess you could say I found more than I bargained for. This happened last year in Philadelphia, in a row house I was helping to renovate. It was built in the 1880s. I was a skeptic. I believed in documented history, brick and mortar, not echoes. The basement was the only part we hadn't touched. It was just a dirt floor crawl space, really. The homeowner wanted to seal it up, pour a concrete slab, but I insisted on documenting it first. For the historical record, the first time I went down there, it was just cold and damp. Normal, but I kept feeling this pressure. Like the air was thicker at the far wall, near the old stone foundation. And there was a smell. Not decay exactly, more like stale water and copper, like old pennies. My curiosity got the better of me. I started prying at the stones in that back wall with my trowel. One was loose. Behind it was a space, a little niche. And inside that niche was a small, hand-sewn leather bag, dry and brittle. It was filled with weird things: bent nails, yellowed bones from a small animal, a lock of hair that was reddish blonde, and a single, blackened tooth that looked human. It was a witch's bottle, or a concealment charm. Our ancestors would hide them in walls to trap malicious spirits, to protect the house. Marisol, the historian, had done her job too well. She had found the guardian, and in doing so, she had broken the seal. I know. I should have left it. But to me, it was an artifact, a fascinating piece of folk magic. I took it upstairs, photographed it, placed it carefully in a specimen box. That night, the noises started, not from the basement, from inside the walls. A slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled through the hollow spaces between the lath and plaster. Then, a soft, wet clicking, like a tongue against the roof of a mouth without lips. I told myself it was pipes. Settling. Rats. Maybe, though the sounds were too deliberate. The homeowner heard it too. We both tried to laugh it off, but the laughter died in our throats. The next day, I was alone in the house, measuring the parlor. The copper smell from the basement was now faintly present upstairs, and it was cold, a deep, marrow-chilling cold that the heating system couldn't touch. I was kneeling by the baseboard when I saw it. In the gap between the floorboard and the wall, in the shadow, there was a movement. Not a rat. It was a finger, long, thin, and grimy, the color of a week-old corpse. It curled slowly, tapping the wood once, tap, before sliding back into the darkness of the wall cavity. I screamed. I scrambled back, my heart trying to burst out of my chest. I called the homeowner and told him everything. We went down to the basement together, a crowbar and a flashlight in hand. The niche in the foundation where I'd found the bag. The stones around it were weeping. Not water. A thick, viscous, dark fluid that smelled of that same coppery stagnation. And the dirt floor in front of it, it was disturbed. Not by tools. It was pushed up in a long, low mound, as if something had burrowed its way out from under the foundation stones. The thing that had been bound, trapped by those nails and bones and hair for over a century, was now free, and it was exploring its house. We fled. We called a priest, a rabbi, a sensitive, anyone who would listen. The sensitive, an older woman with tired eyes, took one step into the house and walked right back out. She said, "There's a hunger in those walls. It's not a ghost. It's something that lived in the ground before the house was ever built." You took its cage away. We put the leather bag back. We didn't just place it in the niche. We mortared the stone in, sealed it tight. The priest blessed it. The rabbi said prayers. We poured the concrete slab over the entire dirt floor, entombing it. The noises lessened, but they didn't stop. Sometimes, on quiet nights, if you press your ear to the plaster, you can hear it. Moving, scratching, waiting. The homeowner sold the house for a massive loss, with full disclosure to the buyers. I don't know if they believe him. I changed careers. I work in a bright, modern museum now, with artifacts behind thick glass. I don't research houses anymore, because now I know that some histories are alive, and some protections you should never, ever disturb. Story 3. The Passengers. Not all monsters lurk in wild places or old houses. Some find you in the most mundane of places, during your daily commute, in the glow of streetlights, surrounded by other people. This is Leo's story. I'm Leo, 48, long-haul trucker for 22 years. I've seen every mile of asphalt between here and the coast, at every hour of God's creation. I'm not spooked by empty roads. What spooks me is when the road isn't empty and the people on it aren't right. This was on I-80 through Nevada about 2 a.m. Vast, empty desert. My rig was the only thing moving under a sky drowning in stars. I saw the car ahead, stalled on the shoulder, hazards blinking a weak, lazy red. A sedan. As I passed, I saw a figure standing beside it, a woman waving her arms. My protocol is to call it in, not stop. Too many bad stories. But something made me look. In my headlights, for just a second, she looked normal, scared. A mother, maybe. I pulled over about 100 yards ahead, grabbed my tire iron just in case, and walked back. There were two of them. The woman, who looked younger up close, maybe late 20s, and a man standing slightly behind her by the open driver's door. They were pale. Not sickly, but a uniform, matte pale, like unglazed porcelain. Their clothes were clean but odd, slightly out of date, like something from a decade-old catalog. No luggage. Car just died, the man said. His voice was flat. No anxiety for a stranded motorist in the middle of nowhere. Can you take us to the next town? I was about to say I'd call a tow when the woman smiled. It was a wide, practiced smile that didn't touch her eyes. Her eyes were a pale, watery blue, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that felt hungry, not in a threatening way, but in a studying way, like I was a page in a book she was memorizing. Leo made a decision he would come to regret. He let them into his truck. They climbed into the passenger side. The woman sat in the middle, the man by the window. I pulled back onto the interstate, the desert swallowing us again. The cab of my truck is my home. I know every sound, every smell. Now it smelled wrong, like ozone after a lightning strike, and underneath, a faint, sweet scent, like rotten fruit left in a sealed jar. And it was cold. The AC was off, but a deep chill radiated from them. I tried to make small talk. Where you headed? The next town. The man said, same flat tone. What do you do? We observe, the woman said. Then she turned that smile on me again. You have an interesting life pattern, Leo. The miles, the solitude. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature went down my spine. I hadn't told them my name. I kept my eyes on the road, my knuckles white on the wheel. In the reflection of my darkened windshield, I could see them. They weren't looking out at the desert. They were both looking at me, unblinking. Then the man spoke, his head tilting in a jerky, bird-like motion. The vehicle you passed at mile marker 117. The red pickup. The driver is experiencing marital discord. He is thinking of leaving his wife. It was so specific, so bizarre. How could you possibly know that? I mumbled. The woman answered, her voice closer to my ear than it should have been. We see the colors around people. His are frayed. Yours. She leaned in. I could feel the cold coming off her. Yours are a steady, lonely blue, but there's a knot of black near your heart. Regret. For the son you don't speak to. My blood turned to ice water. That was private. A pain I carried way down deep, never talked about. How could she? Pull over here, Leo, the man said. We weren't near an exit. Just a bare stretch of shoulder. Something primal in Leo screamed. This was not help. This was an interview. And he was the subject. I didn't argue. I hit the brakes and pulled over. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. Now, they didn't get angry. They just looked at each other, then back at me. The woman's smile finally faded, leaving a blank, placid expression that was somehow worse. The observation is concluded, the man said. They opened the doors and stepped out into the empty night. I didn't wait. I slammed the truck into gear and roared away. In my side mirrors, I saw them standing there, two pale figures in the red glow of my taillights. Not walking, not waving, just standing, growing smaller and smaller. Then, between one blink and the next, they were gone. Not vanished into the desert. Just gone. I drove for 4 hours straight, shaking. At the next truck stop, I poured coffee down my throat and tried to rationalize it. A prank? Hypnosis? But that smell, the cold, and what they knew. Things they couldn't know. I reported it to the state patrol. They found the sedan. It had been reported stolen 2 weeks prior, over 300 miles away. The engine was stripped, completely undrivable. It couldn't have been on that shoulder. There were no footprints around it except mine. The officer on the phone sounded like he thought I was on something. I don't drive that stretch of 80 anymore. I take longer routes. And sometimes, on the loneliest nights, when my mind wanders to my son, I'll catch a whiff of that ozone and rotten fruit smell in my cab. I'll check the mirrors. They're always empty. But I can't shake the feeling that the observation isn't really concluded. That they're still out there, on the edges of the roads, looking for interesting patterns. Looking for lonely blue lights in the dark. Story 4. The Dancer in the Dunes. Our world holds older, stranger places than our highways. Places where the land itself seems to dream, and sometimes those dreams walk. This account comes from Cleo, a geologist who learned that some layers of the earth are not meant to be measured. I'm Cleo. I have a PhD in quaternary geology. I was part of a team taking core samples from the remote sand dunes of the Namib Desert. It's a place out of time, silent, ancient, beautiful in a severe way. We were there to study climate history, locked in the layers of sand. The local guides, men from the sand community, were uneasy. They spoke of a spirit, a Shidun they called her, a being of moving sand and illusion. They said she danced on the crescent ridges at night, and if you watched her, she would lead you into the deep desert where you'd die of thirst your body never found. We smiled, nodded, filed it under local folklore. We were scientists. On the third night, the wind died to nothing. An impossible silence fell over the camp. I couldn't sleep. I stepped out of my tent. The moon was full, painting the sea of dunes in monochrome silver and black. And on the crest of the highest dune near our camp, I saw her. The dancer. At first, I thought it was a trick of the moonlight, a swirl of sand caught in a thermal. But it held a shape, a humanoid shape, tall and impossibly slender, composed of the very sand itself. It wasn't solid. It was in constant, fluid motion, grains cascading down its form like an hourglass, only to be pulled back up from the dune beneath its feet. It moved, not walking, flowing, a slow, hypnotic undulation, a dance of shifting contours against the stars. It was silent. The only sound was the hammering of my own heart. I was mesmerized. The rational part of my brain screamed mirage, parhelion, sleep deprivation, but my eyes, my primal senses, knew this was something else. This was a presence, an intelligence made of place. As I watched, frozen, the figure turned. It had no face, just a smooth, flowing contour where a head would be. But I felt its attention settle on me. A pressure, like the weight of the entire desert focusing on a single point. Me. Then it lifted an arm, a stream of sand extending, graceful and terrible, and pointed. Not at me, past me, into the deep, dark valley between two massive dunes to the east of our camp. The gesture was unmistakable, an invitation, or a command. I stumbled back into my tent, zipped it shut, and sat there shivering until dawn. I told my team leader, a pragmatic German man named Karl. He checked my temperature, suggested I was dehydrated, and told me to rest. But I saw the look in the head guide's eyes when I described it. Pure, unvarnished fear. He said one word. She called you. The next 2 days, I tried to work, but my eyes kept drifting to that eastern valley. It called to me in a way I can't logically explain. A quiet, whispering pull in the back of my skull. On the third night, the silence returned. And so did she, closer this time, on a dune just beyond the perimeter lights. Her dance was slower, more deliberate. The pointing gesture was repeated. The valley. The scientific mind craves data. It needs to test the hypothesis, even a terrifying one. Cleo made a decision. I had to know, just to look, just to prove to myself it was a geological anomaly, a weather phenomenon. At first light, before anyone else was awake, I took a canteen and a GPS unit. I told myself I was just going to the ridge to get a panoramic photo. I walked into the valley. The moment I descended from the ridge, the world changed. The air grew still and heavy. The sounds of the camp vanished, swallowed as if by a giant hand. My GPS unit fizzed with static, then died. The dunes here were different. The sand was a finer, whiter grain, and it held perfect, swirling patterns, not from wind, but as if something had deliberately raked it in vast, complex spirals. And in the center of the valley floor, there was a depression, a perfect, smooth bowl, maybe 30 feet across. It was utterly featureless. No footprints, no plant life, just pristine, untouched sand. And in the center of that bowl, half buried, was a skull. It looked human, but the architecture was elongated. Strange. It was crusted with minerals, ancient. Next to it was my team's missing rock hammer, the one we'd lost 2 days prior. It was clean, as if placed there carefully. That's when the whispering started. Not in my ears, in my mind. A sound like sand sliding over sand, forming words I couldn't quite grasp, but understood the intent of. It was a welcoming, a claiming. This is a quiet place, a still place. You can stay. You will become part of the pattern. Terror, pure and absolute, finally broke the trance. I turned and ran. The sand, which had been firm, now sucked at my boots like it was alive. The ridge seemed to stretch away, getting farther no matter how hard I ran. I could feel her behind me, not chasing, but the dunes themselves were shifting, subtly guiding me in a circle back toward that bowl. I was in a labyrinth of her making. I don't know how I got out. I remember falling, crawling, sobbing, my mouth full of dry sand. I remember the sound of the camp's generator, a distant buzz that became my lifeline. I followed it, blind with panic. I burst back into camp at noon, sunburned, dehydrated, babbling. They found me collapsed by the water tank. The team evacuated her immediately. When asked about the valley, the guides refused to go there. They packed up the entire camp and moved it 20 miles south. I left the desert. I left geology. Carl later emailed me the final core sample data from that general area. One of the cores, from near that valley, contained a layer of anomalous, fused silica grains at a depth that shouldn't have been possible. He called it a geological curiosity. I know what it is. It's a fossil of her dance, from a time when the dunes were an inland sea and she walked its shores. Some places aren't just landscapes. They are organisms, and we are not observers there. We are potential nutrients. She's still there, dancing, and sometimes I dream of that quiet, white valley and the whispering sand. Part of me is still there, in that bowl, becoming part of the pattern. And part of her, the sand in my shoes I could never quite shake out, is here with me. Story 5, The Last Homestead. Our final story takes us to a dying way of life, and to the things that wait to inherit the lonely places. This is Hank's story. I'm Henry McCready. Folks call me Hank. I'm 78 years old. My family has worked the same 800 acres in the Montana highlands since 1902. I've buried my wife, my brother, and 2 of my dogs on this land. I know every coulee, every stand of ponderosa, every rock. Or I thought I did. This is about the north section, a parcel gone back to wild after my granddaddy failed to tame it. We always called it the Gloom. It's a steep, wooded draw that never gets full sun. The pines grow tight and dark there. Game avoids it. Even birdsong sounds muffled. My daddy told me his daddy said something lived in the gloom that was here before the McCreadys. Something that didn't take kindly to fences or axes. We left it be. But last fall, a century-old fence on its edge gave way, and my best bull, Magnus, a stubborn 2,000-pound beast, wandered in. I couldn't afford to lose him, so I went in after him with my rifle and my old coonhound, Bo. The air in the gloom is different. Colder, still, and it smells of damp stone and a sweet, cloying rot, like apples left too long in a cellar. Bo, who'd tree a mountain lion without a whimper, stuck so close to my legs he kept tripping me, his tail tucked, a low whine constant in his throat. The light was a gray-green murk, even at midday. I found Magnus quick enough. He was standing in a small clearing, stock still, not grazing, just staring into the thickest part of the timber. He was trembling. A bull like that doesn't tremble. I followed his line of sight. At first, I saw nothing but shadow and trunk. Then, my eyes adjusted. It was standing between 2 large pines, so still it might have been one of them. It was tall, maybe 9 feet if it straightened, but it was hunched over. Its skin, it didn't have fur, was the exact mottled gray and green of lichen-covered bark. It was lean, all sinew and long limb, with arms that hung nearly to its knees, ending in hands with 2 many long, twig-like fingers. Its face, it had no eyes I could see, just deep, dark hollows. Its mouth was a wide, lipless gash, and it was old. Not old like a man, old like the hills. You could feel it. It wasn't looking at the bull. It was looking at me. A slow, deliberate turn of that eyeless head. I felt a pressure in my skull, a wordless, ancient knowing that washed over me. It wasn't hostile. Not exactly. It was proprietary. It was assessing a blight on its land. A trespass that was several generations deep. I didn't raise my rifle. Some deep, Animal part of me knew lead and powder were as useless against this as a child's slingshot. I just stood there, locked in that terrible, silent stare. Then it moved. It didn't walk. It unfolded. One moment, it was between two trees. The next, it was beside a different one 10 yards to the left, with no movement in between. It was like it had translated from one shadow to another. It was showing him. This was its territory. It had always been. Magnus let out a terrified bellow and finally bolted, crashing back toward the fence line. Bo yelped and ran after him. I was left alone with it. It tilted its head again. That gash of a mouth didn't move, but I heard the voice. Not in my ears. In the creak of the pines, in the sigh of the wind. It was a sound of settling stone and rooting trees. It said mine. Then it pointed one of those twig finger hands. Not at me. At the ground at my feet. I looked down. There, half covered in needles, was a stone foundation. The remains of my great-grandfather's original homestead cabin, the one he'd abandoned after a single, terrible winter. I'd never known exactly where it was. This thing was standing guard over it. Or maybe it was the cabin itself, grown old and bitter and alive. I backed away. One step, two. It didn't follow. It just watched me with those hollows. I turned and walked out of the gloom, my spine crawling, expecting to feel those twig fingers on my neck any second. I didn't run until I was back in the sun. I patched the fence. Magnus wouldn't go within 100 yards of it after that. He died this spring of natural causes. I had him butchered. The meat was sour, uneatable. I don't farm the north section anymore. I don't even look at it. I signed papers with a conservation group. When I die, this land goes to them, with a covenant. The gloom is never to be developed, logged, or entered. They think it's for an endangered owl. Let him think that. That thing, it wasn't a monster in the way you think. It wasn't evil. It was the land. And we were the temporary thing. The fleeting noise. It's still there, in the deepening gloom. Waiting. Patient. Because it knows what we city folks have forgotten. Houses fall, fences rot, and names on deeds fade. But the old things, the true things, they endure. They just wait for us to finish our business and leave. Profound silence. 5 stories. 5 witnesses, from the surveyor to the trucker to the old rancher. Each one a normal person, grounded in the tangible world, until the day the world revealed a deeper, darker layer. These accounts share a common thread, a profound violation of reality as we understand it. They speak of intelligence where we expect instinct, of ancient presence where we see empty land, of a hunger that is not merely physical, but existential. They remind us that the map is not the territory, that in the silence between the trees, in the depths of a foundation, in the emptiness of a desert night, older rules may apply. We label these encounters monsters, but perhaps that's just a word for the things that live in the unmapped corners of existence, watching, waiting, and occasionally reminding us of our place. If you have had an encounter that changed your understanding of the world, we invite you to share it in the comments below. Your story might be the key to another's sanity. If you found yourself holding your breath tonight, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Nightbound Bloodline. We are the keepers of these testimonies, the chroniclers of the unexplained. This has been Nightbound Bloodline. Thank you for listening. Until next time, sleep with one eye open. The end.